is Dave Stricklan, who I'm going to try to find my, well, I can't find it, but Dave Stricklan, why don't you introduce yourself? Yeah.
And where's the advance on this?
Should be right there.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate being here. Are we up? Okay. I grew up on a ranch farm in the mountains of Idaho. I worked for the Forest Service for 12 years as a wildlife biologist and range con. Then went to Brigham Young University, Idaho, and developed their range and wildlife programs. And then I taught at New Mexico State in the range department for some number of years. Then I retired and went home to Idaho, but somehow I had been working with a number of groups. I worked with Sagebrush Habitat Conservation Fund, and I had a chance to do this. In fact, as a connection, they connected me with this, and I guess the reason I'm in this section is because I was displeased, impatient, and done with how things are managed now. And, people say, well, could you do better? And I say, yeah, by quite a bit. Yeah, I could. So, are we losing me? Okay. No, it's number 4. Panel 4, speaker 2, there we go. So I said, okay, let's do this privately. So that's what this is, okay? So I want to give this preface. I'm not unaware. There we go. No, it's the other one. Okay. And then when we get there, just stop. And Grace, don't show me the screen. Wave your hand at me. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, okay. And I'll go ahead and I'll put that on, go ahead and on project. Okay, perfect. Now I want to say something before I get started. I'm not unaware of the controversies associated with horses and bison on public lands, okay? And I'm going to touch on that just for a moment because that's what we're using. But I am speaking more to that in their evolutionary place a little later on in a second talk that I have here today. So I'm not going to say too much about that. I will say that it is clear that all herbivores can overgraze if the level of use exceeds plant production. And so I just want to give that caveat out there. Most herbivory is not bad in and of itself, and when large herbivores are controlled either by predation and or weather, and in our case, we're going to use contraception on these animals so that we don't exceed our capacity of the range. So this is a rewilding project, and rewilding has come to mean a whole bunch of different things to a bunch of different people, but the classic definition that we stay with is cores, corridors, and carnivores. And so I chose a landscape area that we could work on this that connects the Yellowstone core to the Central Idaho Wilderness core. And then there is a corridor between them, and the ranch location in the valley of Birch Creek, it controls that corridor, and that's why I selected it. And I will just say this really briefly. The corridors to the north that a lot of people are working on and trying real hard to make work are full of private land, okay? And I don't believe in 200 years they will function as corridors. I believe those patches of forest will be sinks, population sinks, and the sources will be in the cores, and it will be connected by a corridor. Now, yesterday, there was a reference twice to the Centennial Valley of Montana, and it is beautiful. but it is also full of private land and folks that are ranching it, like the Koch brothers and Rupert Murdoch. There is, and this seems to be kind of a secret, but there are two sides to that mountain range. I've seen it. There's another side to it. It's on the Idaho side, and it's 97% public land. And that's where the corridor is. And in fact, the wolfers, the wolf trappers, at the beginning of the 1900s, called the Centennial Mountains on the Idaho side the Wolf Highway, because that's where the wolves traveled, because there's two plateaus on it, and it's nice, okay? And perhaps it's not as pretty as some people take the Montana side, and that's actually to its advantage, because it's not been developed, okay? All right. So there we are, and I'm just talking about that. That's enough of that. All right. I've been working on this corridor for about 25 years, and as a young pup biologist with the Forest Service on the Targhee National Plan, I really dogged the resource officer to put in the new forest plan that you didn't have to graze every allotment, you could have wildlife on it. I did that so that we could put bison in there and protect grizzly bears. He's an old range con, he's a good guy. No, I'm not gonna put that in there, it'll get appealed, we're not gonna do that. I worked on him and worked on him and worked on him until, and I don't know if you can read that, but it says, I've underlined it, he put this in the forest plan. Not all areas about rangelands are grazed by domestic livestock. Some areas may be reserved for wildlife and watershed rehabilitation work. He was pretty cagey. He was an old range guy. He put that in there. And so the Targhee National Forest has used that NEPA wording to then close over on the right-hand side sheep allotments that are shown in pink. At that time, there were no grizzly bears on the Idaho side, and they were all killed. They were killed by the sheep ranchers, okay? They bought the sheep ranchers out one at a time, slowly, drove me crazy. The old range con said, that'll work, that'll happen, be patient. I said, I'll be as old as you. And I was right. The bears have now moved on their own. And do I have a cursor? I don't know if I have a cursor that will show. That have moved from Yellowstone, which is here, across I-15 and into Birch Creek on their own, okay? So that's what's happened. It's been passive. They've used willing seller buyouts for people, sheep ranchers that changed and wanted to leave. And the picture shown below is of a sow with a sow cub. And that sow cub will have to move west because all of the territories are filled to the east. And that's how they leapfrog. And in 25 years, they've made it, okay? All right. In our project, we will use horses to fill the public land grazing permit requirement. So in order to have a public land grazing permit, you have to run livestock. If you don't run livestock, they'll give it to someone else, okay? So what we're doing is running livestock, and horses qualify, okay? And so do bison. And so our horses will be on the permits and year-round, like wildlife, which is essentially what they are from the Pleistocene, okay? We rigorously manage the horses and potentially the bison, we haven't gotten those on yet, at a conservative stocking rate. And I'm going to say why this is rewilding in the next slide. Will allow natural predation, natural winter loss, and when needed, contraception, because you can't go over the numbers that the range will take. And you can do that if you're not careful. Horses are a classic North American Ice Age mammal, and along with bison, They fill what are currently empty wildlife niches. Okay, here's some of the things that we hope to do with our conservative stocking, where our horses and bison have replaced European farm animals. That's what we have on public wildlands, is European farm animals, cows, okay? And they don't graze like animals that move. We'll have multi-species functionality in that corridor. Those genes are moving back and forth across the corridor at different rates, and those genes move in the bodies of animals, okay, over time. We have elevational and seasonal migration patterns, rather than just leaving European farm animals right in one place and trying to have equal coverage during the grazing season. We'll have reduced grazing pressure, which will allow increased other wildlife. At this point, most grazing allotments shut the water off. They're developed into pipelines and pumped into troughs. We're going to go ahead and run those springs all year, and that will help things like amphibians and other animals. It's important that the horses will be hindgut fermenters. This helps with forb distribution. Ruminants, when you get forb seeds in a cow's rumen, they are almost always completely digested and are not fertile when they come out in the pile. Coming through horses, those forbs are oftentimes viable. And one of the things that you have with long-term cattle grazing is a loss of forbs on the landscape. And so the pollinators, the small mammals, don't have that resource available to them, so the biodiversity goes down. And so I think at this point, the seed bank where we are now is depauperate, and is so because there has not been forb distribution for decades. And in fact, when you see an animal die on the range, generally you get nitrogen cycling and you get forbs that show you where that is. We're not getting that because I believe that our seed bank is diminished, and it'll take us a while to get that back. But the horses will work with that. Also, that forb access is good for rabbits, sage grouse, and pronghorn, and that is augmented by lichens. And there are vagrant lichens, and Birch Creek is famous for this. The Botanical Society of America contacted me and said, "Can you take us for a field trip in Birch Creek?" I said, "Oh yeah, sure, I can do that. Let me tell you about Birch Creek, and there's some lichens there you might be interested in." They said, "I guess you're new here. We study these. The vagrant lichens in Birch Creek are world famous, son. Just show us where the grazing's been, and we'll take it from there." So I learned a lot with those guys. We'll also keep carrion resources on the landscape, and so nutrients will cycle much better. Right now, nutrients go off the allotments in the winter, late fall and winter, and they're taken to a feedlot, and then they're taken to a kill floor, and then those nutrients are flushed down the toilet. That's where they go. Okay, we're going to leave them on the landscape. These animals will die with a regular life history. No insecticide. And that will also help carrion beetles, which are almost a lost art now because there's not enough carrion. It will also help things like wolverine, which come through. They come through that valley, but there's not enough death loss for them to have a carrion resource. I'll tell you just one quick story. In the 1830s, Osborne Russell was near Ogden, Utah, and kicked a wolverine off an elk carcass in the summer. And in fact, he saw the islands out in the Great Salt Lake, and he drew it. So he was sitting in the modern day McKay Hospital parking lot. That's where he was. And they said, "Why was the wolverine there?" Because, is this wolverine? Yeah, the wolverine was there because there was a dead elk. And the carrion resources are one of the reasons that we don't have them. Okay, well, the carnivore activity in the winter, and you can see all the things why this is a rewilding project. The location is in the Birch Creek Valley of Idaho, right on the Continental Divide there. Our founder, Amanda Kalimian, shown there on the right with me, and that was a cold day. The wind was blowing, and that's why we look like that. There are allotments up and down that valley. Shown there are the BLM allotments in tan and the Forest Service allotments in green, and the ones that we have are cross-hatched. We have a permit right now for horses on the Forest Service allotment, and are working, we just have cattle permits for the BLM, but are working through the NEPA process and getting the data that we need in order to make that application. We do have a crossing permit that allow us to move animals from the top cross-hatching to the bottom cross-hatching, although we're not doing that this year. Yeah, we're just not ready. But the idea is to have that seasonal migration from high elevation to lower elevation over time. And we have 6 grazing allotments at this point. Okay, so essentially what we're doing is become part of the system. Okay, I don't think we were making progress into having wildlands have wildlife function on them in the West. And it's just not set up that way, you know. So we decided to do it ourselves, okay? So that's basically what we're doing, and moving forward, it's really fun. We're getting a lot of interest, particularly from the European rewilders, and we're doing okay? Okay, all right, and it's a lot of fun, and I think this is a better model. So we encourage you to visit us up there. We have a Institute House where you can stay, and we also, for those of you who are serious and have some connections, there are some ranches that are available that we could work with you on, and we are working with the local folks. We're working with several ranchers where they're allowing us to put our livestock, horses and bison, on their ground. And because we only have cattle permits, then we're on the BLM, we're leasing our land to them, so their cows go there, so our horses and bison can go down on their private land. It's really important to work with the local people. So how much time do I have? You got 4 minutes. Oh, okay. A number of the ranchers, I picked this valley because of the demographics of it, and they're working with us, and one rancher in particular said, I will work with you and trade lands with you, and in fact, many of our horses foaled on his place this year. He said, if you'll hire local people. There are 95 people in that town, 6 kids in most classes, unless it's a big class, and then there's like 7 kids in it, okay? But there is a larger, so 100 people, 95 people, but there is a larger town about 55 miles away, and it's a county seat. It's Du Bois, and it has about 450 people in it. This is different. This valley is about 400,000 acres, which is a quarter of the size of Yellowstone. So we're doing this on a landscape level that controls that corridor that links the 2 cores, okay? So it's 400,000 acres. 14 people live in it, year-round, counting the cowboys that work for absentee landowners. So that works out to be 35 square miles per person. That's the population density, okay? We chose this place on purpose. The animals are moving through it. I believe that when we pass this on, not to the future generations, but to the next civilization, I believe that this corridor and these 2 cores will remain as the refuge and the bioexample of the Northern Rockies flora and fauna. That's what we're doing, okay? All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you.